Hi, beautiful. How nice of you to stop by on this very special day. I'm Andre. Welcome to my channel where we talk about some of the most disturbing true crime cases. So, if that's something that you're interested in, you can subscribe and make sure to click that notification button so you don't miss any new uploads. Now, today is Valentine's Day. So tell me in the comments, what are you doing on this special day? Are you spending the day with your partner? Are you by yourself? Or actually, you're here with me. So we are technically spending Valentine's Day together, right? Anyway, today's case is a Valentine's Day murder with a Valentine's Day arrest, which doesn't happen very often. Normally, investigators take more time to find the culprit. But in this case, the arrest happened just a few hours after the murder. So, we are about to get into Susan Hamilton's case, and we'll see how love, control, and lies collided on Valentine's Day. Every year, Valentine's Day tells us the same stories that love is gentle, that commitment is safe, and that the person beside you is the one to protect you. Statistics show something very different, though, because for many women, the most dangerous place is not in a dark alley, is not in some stranger's car, but it is inside their own home. On Valentine's Day 2001, Susan Hamilton was killed inside her own house that she shared with her husband. And by the time the flowers wilted and the cards were thrown away, one question remained. Was this crime committed by some stranger or by the person who slept beside her every night? John Hamilton and Susan Hamilton were perceived by their friends and family as a devoted, affluent couple. They lived in a high end neighborhood, they owned luxury cars, and they often shared their wealth with their four kids from previous marriages. The couple met at a birthday party in 1985, and 2 years later, they were married. Throughout their 14-year-long marriage, John was known for making grand romantic gestures, such as giving Susan a Porsche on their wedding day. Also, if that's not how you say Porsche, let's just ignore it. Now, this wealth came from the fact that John was a very successful OBGYN, and he also performed abortions at another clinic that Susan managed for 2 days per week. Due to their work at the abortion clinic, they were often targets of anti abortion activists. 1 week prior to the murder, John actually received a wanted, dead or alive poster. Let me tell you, if that happened to me, I would walk around with security 24/7. But also, I'm the type of person that during a horror movie would just say, I'll just jump out of it. If that happened to me, I'll just jump out of the window. Like, there's no reason for me to witness a demonic possession or whatever is happening in the horror movie. Like, I don't want to. I don't want to experience it. I would just jump out of the window. Anyway, back to our case. So, as I said, 1 week prior to the murder, John received this wanted dead or alive poster. And also 2 days prior to the murder, there was an arson attempt at the clinic. So we are already starting to get suspicious and see where this is heading. On the morning of Valentine's Day in 2001, John Hamilton discovered his wife deceased on the bathroom floor. During the 911 call, he was distressed and he was claiming that he was performing CPR on his wife. When paramedics arrived, they discovered a very graphic scene. Susan had been strangled with two neckties, and she was hit with such force that brain matter was exposed. One of the first responders noted that John Hamilton's CPR technique was wrong. He was pumping the victim's chest and stomach area. And despite the fact that there was blood everywhere, including on John Hamilton's shirt, there was no blood around his mouth or on his face. Because when you give CPR, like he claimed, you do the pumps on the chest and mouth to mouth. And if you are giving mouth to mouth to someone with facial trauma, especially that kind of trauma that Susan had, it was impossible for him not to get blood on his face. Now, you ask me, a doctor? A doctor doesn't know how to do CPR correctly? Suspicious. Now, the initial theory was that this could be a robbery gone wrong. However, there was no forced entry, no broken windows, no broken doors, and nothing was missing from the house. But John Hamilton said that he came home from the hospital and he found his wife deceased in the bathroom. That was it. That was the story, nothing else. Obviously, the anti abortion activists provided a potential external motive, but after investigating the crime scene, authorities started to scrutinize John Hamilton's narrative and the couple's private life. Evidence suggested that their marriage was under strain, and the authorities found a Valentine's Day note in John's car from Susan, but besides the love message, Susan noted that she had brought the card weeks prior and it doesn't feel appropriate anymore, but that she still loves him. Now, why would she say that? Why wouldn't it feel appropriate anymore to gift a Valentine's Day card to your husband? I guess that suggested that they had marital problems or that their marriage was on the verge of ending, maybe. Besides this weird note, a neighbor testified that Susan suspected John of having an affair. Investigation of phone records revealed around 100 calls between John and an exotic dancer. Allegedly, Susan confronted John about who this person was that was calling him so much, but John said that he was just acting as a counselor because this patient of his needed some moral support as she was having thoughts. We know that in cases like this, the husband is the first suspect. But John's alibi arrested on a tight surgical schedule, so that would clear him almost immediately. But that was before authorities digged a little deeper because they have found some discrepancies in what John has told them about his schedule and what actually happened. John's schedule that day was as it follows. At 7 a.m., John begins his first surgery. At 8 a.m., he leaves the clinic. Allegedly, at 8:30, he finishes speaking with a friend and heads home. At 9 a.m., John's second surgery of the day is scheduled to begin. However, at 9:20 a.m., the same time that Susan was expected to leave for a meeting, John was paged by the hospital because his patient was already under anesthesia and he was nowhere to be found. At 9:30, John finally arrives and begins scrubbing in, with the surgery starting around 9:40. Now, after the surgery was done, he went home, and at 10:45 a.m., he discovered Susan's body. The delay in the second surgery gave John Hamilton 1 hour window where nobody knew where he was. And investigators believed that during that hour, he had time to come home, commit the murder, attempt a cleanup, and go back to work. Let's talk a little bit about what other evidence the police had found and why was John behaving so weirdly. Now, I say that he was acting weird because while in the patrol car, he was observed while he was scraping his knuckles and his forehead, his head, against the wire mesh. Now, you know how in a police car there's that wire mesh between the back seats and the front seats? Well, John was seen scraping his knuckles against it and his head. There's actually a picture of him from when he was arrested, and you can still see red marks on his face. Investigators believe this to be an attempt to mask any scratches or injuries that he sustained during a possible struggle with Susan. Other significant information is that blood, hair, and skin fragments were found in John's car, more specifically on the steering wheel, on the door, and on the seat. He claimed that this happened because while he was giving his wife CPR, he realized that his car is blocking the driveway, which means that the ambulance would not be able to drive in his driveway, I guess. So he decided to stop giving CPR to his wife and go outside, move the car, and come back. Now, that's why he claims that this evidence was found inside his car. Investigators also found bloody shoe prints around the house, but none leading to the car outside, which is weird because John just said that the blood and everything that was found in his car was because he went in the car to move it. But there's no bloody shoe prints leading to the car. Now, the investigators believe this to be because the killer most likely changed or took a shower before leaving the crime scene. They have also found a wet rag in a pool of blood, which they assumed it was an abandoned cleanup attempt. The prosecution faced challenges, including the fact that there was no murder weapon and there was no history of domestic violence. So the defense went exactly with that. They focused on John's reputation as a loving husband and the fact that family and friends could not see him commit something like this, especially to Susan, who they claimed he loved deeply. So the defense introduced the possibility of an outside intruder. However, the fact that they could not find a motive didn't stop the trial from moving forward. And as I said, it was not looking good for John. So the defense hired Tom Bevel, a highly regarded blood spatter specialist, to testify in John's favor. While Bevel initially sustained that the marks on John's shirt were consistent with him giving CPR to his wife, the cross examination would prove fatal to this defense. Because during cross examination, the prosecutors asked Tom Bevel if there was any evidence that might have been overlooked or anything new that the blood spatter could tell us. That's when, under oath, Tom Bevel said that yes, there was overlooked evidence. And he talked about the blood found inside of John's right cuff. So he had the shirt, and there was blood here inside of the cuff of the shirt. This specific spatter was consistent with the blowback or the radiating spray of hitting someone with something. Like when you hit someone like this with something, their blood would end up inside the cuff of your shirt. This evidence placed John in the immediate vicinity of the assault as it was happening, rather than arriving after the fact and encountering the body of his wife, how he initially stated. After this, the jury deliberated for 2 hours, and in December 2001, Dr. John Hamilton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His subsequent appeals to the Supreme Court were also unsuccessful. Now, despite the conviction, his specific motive beyond a sudden snap during a domestic dispute is still up for debate, as he had, as I said before, no financial struggle or no documented history of rage or anything like that. So, in November 2025, the legal director of the Oklahoma Innocence Project, Andrea Miller, said the group is taking up on Hamilton's case after reviewing it and finding issues with the evidence used. Miller believes a second piece of evidence combined with the updated Oklahoma laws can help Hamilton's case. She said, and I quote, "His conviction is based largely on blood spatter analysis, and there has been changes in the understanding of blood spatter evidence in the last 20 years, and we think the evidence that was presented against him was unreliable," unquote. A law passed in Oklahoma in 2013, 12 years after the murder, states that DNA evidence can be retested if there is a reasonable probability that the results would have led to a different outcome. And also that the evidence exists and that the testing is not for the purpose of delay. Miller and Hamilton are now waiting on DNA testing for answers, a process that could take months or even years. But Miller said that she has confidence and that, quote, We wouldn't have filed a petition on his behalf if we didn't think there was a path to get there. We believe in his case, we believe his innocence, and so hopefully we will get to the finish line. Unquote. I presented this case to you how it happened. The jury found John Hamilton guilty, and that's exactly what I told you. However, if in the future there will be proof that he did not do it and that there was someone else involved in the murder of his wife, I will make an update and I would let everyone know. And if this new evidence or this new analysis or anything can prove that he was innocent, I hope that the state takes full responsibility and they admit their error and they will make sure to implement procedures and everything that needs to be done to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And if it's the case, I hope they compensate John as well, although I know that there's no amount of money that could compensate the fact that you spend the last 25 years in prison or the fact that your wife's killer is still out there. Regardless of this little situation that we have with this case, we have to remember that cases like this exist everywhere and they don't stay in the past. They linger in quiet homes, in unanswered questions, in spaces where trust once lived. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Susan Hamilton's story. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to your local support resources. I promise you that there is help out there. And as always, I want you to take care of yourself and stay safe. Bye.